For as long as I can remember, I've always lived within the confines of my own bubble. As a college student living alone in a small, worn-out apartment, the world outside often felt distant. Between attending lectures and drowning in assignments, my single status only served to amplify the quiet nights. Loneliness had its own soundtrack, the ticking of an old wall clock, the distant hum of traffic, and the rustle of academic papers. Then, one gloomy afternoon, an unexpected letter arrived. The bold letterhead of Harrington and Associates lawyers was unfamiliar. It informed me of my grandfather's passing, a grandfather I barely knew, a figure shrouded in family whispers and mystery. What truly startled me was the content of his will. Against all expectations, he had left me his house, a house I never knew existed. A swirl of emotions gripped me: surprise, curiosity, and a hint of apprehension. While we had been estranged for reasons no one spoke about, the gravity of inheriting such a legacy from a nearly forgotten family member was overwhelming. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, I made up my mind. It was time to leave the comfort of my isolated existence, to journey to this ancestral home and uncover the mysteries it held. Little did I know, the layers of its secrets would delve far deeper than the dust-covered floorboards and old family portraits. The sun sat low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the time-worn cabin. As I approached, memories of whispered legends filled my mind. I found out from my mum before coming here that apparently the cabin had been in our family for generations, and while I had never visited it before, I immediately felt an undeniable bond. The wooden door creaked softly as I entered, the scent of aged wood and memories enveloping me. The living room was as if frozen in time. An old grandfather clock, long silenced, stood proudly against the faded wallpaper. Tattered armchairs flanked a stone fireplace, its hearth cold and gray. I wandered into the kitchen, where I found ceramic dishes stacked neatly in the cupboard and a kettle on the old gas stove. My fingertips brushed against the yellowed pages of a cookbook, the recipes handwritten in a cursive I recognized as my great-grandmother's. Beyond the kitchen was what appeared to be a study. A mahogany desk sat under a dusty window, its surface adorned with faded letters and family portraits. A pang of nostalgia washed over me as I picked up a photograph of a young couple, their eyes gleaming with hope and dreams. They were the original owners, the ones who had first tamed this wilderness. Night was approaching, so I decided to head to the bedroom to unpack. A four-poster bed with embroidered linens dominated the room. Beside it, a vanity mirror reflecting the room's dim light. Each step on the wooden floorboards made a gentle creak, adding to the ambiance. But as the cloak of night tightened, I began to notice an oddity. A soft, persistent noise echoed through the cabin. It wasn't the familiar sounds of an old house settling. No, this was different. A low, rhythmic hum, punctuated by occasional whispers. The sound seemed to originate from beneath the floor, like a heartbeat of the cabin itself. I tried to dismiss it as mere fatigue or the byproduct of too many family tales swirling in my head. But the more I focused, the more pronounced the noise became. With every passing hour, as shadows played tricks on the walls, the enigma deepened. What was the source of this eerie resonance? Sleep eluded me. Each time I closed my eyes, the whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent. Every corner of the cabin held a story, a secret, and as the first night in my ancestral home wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin wasn't just sharing its history, it was beckoning me to uncover it. Dawn couldn't come soon enough, but until then, I was trapped in this dance of nostalgia and burgeoning dread, on the cusp of a mystery that seemed as old as the cabin itself. Morning greeted me with its soft, comforting light, but the ethereal whispers from last night still lingered in my ears. I was no longer content to brush them aside as mere imagination. My historian instincts were itching. I had to find the source. I began a thorough examination of the cabin. From the attic filled with antique toys and memorabilia to the kitchen with its ancient oven, I explored each room with a meticulous eye. But it was in my grandfather's office that I felt an uncanny pull. The office was filled with relics of his life, an old typewriter, maps of the surrounding area, and a magnifying glass with a worn wooden handle. A large bookshelf lined one wall, sagging under the weight of countless books. I skimmed the spines, history, mythology, and more than a few about the supernatural. Drawn by an inexplicable intuition, I approached his sturdy oak desk. The top was scattered with various papers, most of them yellowed with age. I sifted through them, searching for a clue, and then, just as I was about to give up, I noticed an unevenness in the wood panel on the right side. Pressing against it, I was met with a soft click, a hidden compartment. My heart raced as I gently pulled it open, revealing a leather-bound journal inside. The leather was worn and the pages were frayed at the edges. My grandfather's initials were embossed in gold on the cover. Opening it, I found entries dating back decades. At first glance, they seemed to be the random musings of a mind unhinged, detailing day-to-day events from weather patterns to bizarre tales of noises and apparitions. An entry from July 1953 caught my attention.
The noises continue beneath the house. They're growing louder, more insistent. Perhaps I'm just losing my mind, hearing things that aren't there.
As I continued reading, the tone grew more erratic. An entry from October 1953 read,
It's playing games with my mind. This entity, if that's what I dare call it, seems to be one step ahead. Perhaps it's my own paranoia feeding these delusions.
The writings, though intriguing, were hard to take seriously. An entry from December 1953 pushed the boundaries of credibility even further.
Now it's taken on voices I think I recognize. It urges me to release it, seducing with tales of power and wisdom.
I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my temples. Whoever wrote this diary seemed to have been grappling with their own sanity. The whispers I'd heard the night before, probably just a result of my tired mind and this cabin's old structure. Still, as far-fetched as it all seemed, a tiny, nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered, what if there was a grain of truth in these delirious entries? A heavy weight settled in my chest. I was at a crossroads. Should I dig deeper, risking my sanity and potentially stumbling upon something I shouldn't stumble upon, or should I leave well enough alone? But curiosity, as it often does, proved too potent to resist. The historian in me needed answers. I decided to dive deeper, to unearth the secrets that had been buried for so long. Little did I know that the true horror was yet to come. I spent hours poring over the journal, each entry more chilling than the last. My grandfather spoke of rituals and sigils, of an old-world knowledge passed down to him to contain the entity. The journal painted a picture of an escalating psychological battle, a tug-of-war between my grandfather's will and the insidious temptations of the unseen force. He had made references to several objects around the cabin that he believed helped keep the entity at bay. I recalled the ornate mirror in the bedroom, its frame inscribed with symbols similar to those in the journal. The old grandfather clock, silent in its vigil, was said to have been crafted from a tree struck by lightning, a conduit of natural energy that repelled the malevolence below. Yet, as I immersed myself in the writings, the subtle hum returned. The whispers threaded their way through the silence, ebbing and flowing like the tide. My heartbeat quickened. They seemed more persistent, closer than before. Placing the journal down, I resolved to uncover the origin of the sound. I moved through the cabin, listening intently, allowing the hum to guide me. Room by room, the noise grew louder and more distinct until I found myself standing before a large rug in the living area. Beneath it lay a trapdoor, the cellar. My hands trembled as I pulled the rug aside, revealing a sturdy wooden door with an old iron handle. It was locked, but next to it was a keyhole. The air grew colder as I approached. Every instinct screamed at me to turn away, but the historian in me, the seeker of truth, would not be denied. I remembered spotting an old set of keys in one of the kitchen drawers earlier. Without hesitation, I fetched them, trying each one until I heard a satisfying click. The door creaked open, revealing a steep set of stairs descending into darkness. I took a deep breath, flashlight in hand, and began my descent. The air was damp, the walls lined with age-old stone. As I reached the bottom, I entered a chamber filled with shelves of old jars, artifacts, and cassette tapes, the same tapes mentioned in the journal. But my focus was shattered when the whispers coalesced into a single chilling voice, echoing through the cellar.
You shouldn't have come here.
Panic gripped me. From the far corner, an oppressive darkness began to manifest. Shadows writhed, slowly taking a semi-human form, its edges blurred and shifting. The air grew thick, heavy with an ancient malevolence. In a moment of sheer terror, I stumbled backward, knocking over a shelf. Jars shattered, spilling their contents, and among them, a peculiar crystal that pulsed with a muted glow. Instinctively, I reached for it. The entity recoiled as if in pain.
What do you have there?
It hissed, its voice dripping with venom. With the crystal clutched firmly in hand, I backed away, moving toward the stairs. The voice followed, alternating between anger and pleading.
Release me, and you can have everything you desire.
I didn't look back. My only thought was escape. I ascended the stairs two at a time, slammed the trapdoor shut, and quickly locked it. Breathless and shaken, I returned the rug to its place, praying that whatever barriers my grandfather had set up would hold. For now, the entity, as my grandfather called it, was confined once more, but I had inadvertently come face to face with it. My stay at the cabin was no longer about family history or nostalgia. It was now a battle for my very soul. Night had fallen, and the once peaceful chirping of crickets was drowned out by the pulse of my racing heart. The soft glow of the fireplace offered minimal comfort against the chill of my encounter below. But then, as I sat trying to process everything, a voice interrupted my thoughts, not from the basement, but from right behind me, clear and cold.
So you found me.
I turned slowly, my eyes widening as they met the shadows dancing across the room. The flames from the fireplace seemed to bend and sway unnaturally, their flickers forming the vague silhouette of a figure. The entity. You, I stammered. How? The entity's form coalesced further, revealing piercing eyes that held both sorrow and malevolence.
I've been trapped for so long,
it whispered.
Isolation has its toll, even on beings like me. All I want is to be free.
I could feel its words weaving a web around me, pulling me in. It spoke of eons of captivity, of being wrongfully imprisoned by those who feared its power. It hinted at vast knowledge and promised to share it, to make me powerful beyond belief if I'd only release it.
Think of it, Jake.
It purred.
The universe's mysteries laid bare before you. The ability to bend reality to your whim. All you need to do is free me.
But the journal's warning echoed in my mind. You are manipulative, cunning, I shot back, trying to sound more confident than I felt. How can I trust you?
Trust?
It let out a raspy chuckle.
Trust is a human construct. What I offer is transactional. My freedom for your elevation.
A suffocating pressure filled the room, making it hard to think. The weight of its gaze, its presence, threatened to crush my will. But buried deep within its words, among the allure of promises, I sensed a desperation, an urgent need. The entity was powerful, yes, but its captivity had weakened it. I've read the journal, I whispered, my voice firm. I know what you are and what you've done. My grandfather fought hard to keep you locked away, and I won't betray his legacy. Its form wavered, anger flickering in its eyes.
Your grandfather was a fool.
it hissed.
But you, Jake, you can be so much more.
I choose my own path, I responded, gaining confidence. I held up the glowing crystal from the cellar, its soft light pushing back against the oppressive darkness. And it doesn't include you. The entity recoiled, a sound like a growl emanating from its form.
This isn't over, Jake.
It hissed, the shadows dissolving as it retreated.
You can't ignore me forever.
The room returned to normal, the fireplace's gentle warmth bringing a semblance of peace, but the battle lines were drawn. The entity might be bound to the cellar, but its influence reached much further. I was in its domain now, and the game had only just begun. The once comfortable cabin felt changed, haunted by the memories of the entity's whispers. Every creak, every rustle outside became a sinister melody, choreographed by the being below. At some point, exhausted by the mental tug-of-war and waiting for anything else to happen, I must have drifted off, because what I woke to was not the safe corner of the room, but a distorted dreamscape, everything blurred and nebulous. The walls of the cabin seemed to stretch and distort, taking on the quality of a sinister funhouse.
You think you can resist me?
The voice was everywhere and nowhere, the echo of the entity taunting me. Shapes shifted in the periphery, shadows that took on humanoid forms, only to dissolve when I tried to focus. The weight of unseen eyes was on me, their gaze palpable.
You are in my realm now,
the voice cooed, honeyed yet dripping with menace. My pulse quickened, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. In this place, the line between reality and illusion was thin, but I clung to a thread of rational thought. It's just a dream, I told myself. You're in control. Suddenly, the room shifted, plunging me into an oppressive, infernal hellscape. The once familiar cellar was transformed into a pit of searing heat and suffocating smoke. Everywhere I turned, the air crackled with malevolence, the very walls bleeding and pulsating as if alive. Before me stood twisted versions of my parents, my sister, and friends from college. Their bodies were scorched and mangled, their skin blistered and peeling from the relentless heat. Chains bound them, pulling their limbs taut as they writhed in agony. Their eyes, hollow and filled with pain, bore into mine, accusing and pleading in equal measure. From the raw, parched throat of my mother, a guttural cry emerged.
Why, Jake?
She rasped, tears of molten lava streaming down her disfigured face.
Why didn't you listen?
Their mournful wails and cries for mercy echoed around me, creating a symphony of torment and despair. The weight of their suffering pressed down on me, threatening to crush my very soul. Every glance, every sob was a chilling testament to my failure to heed a dire warning. A cold realization gripped me. The entity was burrowing into my deepest fears, using them as a weapon. But as the faces morphed into more grotesque versions of themselves, their features twisted with anger and resentment, I steeled myself. "This isn't real," I shouted into the abyss. "You can't control me." The cacophony grew louder, the voices overlapping, a chorus of disdain. But amidst the noise, another sound echoed. The hum of the crystal. Its familiar vibration grew stronger, providing a counterpoint to the chaos. Grasping for it mentally, I focused on the hum, letting it drown out the maddening chorus. As the hum intensified, the dream world around me started to fracture, shards of the illusion breaking away. The entity's voice, once domineering, now held a note of panic.
You can't escape me, Jake. You are mine.
But the more I focused on the crystal, the weaker the entity became. The dream world shattered completely, and I awoke with a start, drenched in sweat, but back in the safety of the room. It seemed impossible that just a few moments ago, I had been trapped in a nightmare of the entity's making. I rose, my legs shaky, but determination fueling me. The confrontation in the dreamscape had made things clear. The entity was powerful, but not invincible, and the crystal, with its mysterious hum, was key. I had won this round, but the battle of wills was far from over. The entity would come at me again, more cunning and desperate than before. I had to be prepared, both mentally and emotionally, for the next onslaught. The confines of the cabin would become the battleground for our dueling wills, a test of endurance and resolve. Outside, the woods seemed to watch in silent anticipation, as if they too knew that the true struggle was yet to come. I descended the creaky steps of the cabin, my resolve stronger than ever. The events of the night were clear in my mind, a sign of what awaited me if I gave in to the entity's beguiling promises. As I approached the cellar door, a feeling of dread washed over me. The door seemed to pulsate, alive with a malevolent energy. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The cellar was darker than before, the air thick with a palpable tension. The chained figure stood, its form fluctuating between the innocent human facade and the twisted, sinister being I had glimpsed in my dreams.
Why continue to fight, Jake?
It hissed, the voice echoing off the walls.
Release me, and power beyond your wildest dreams can be yours.
Every word dripped with temptation. A lesser man might have faltered, seduced by the promise of untold power. But with every utterance, the memory of my family, distorted and accusing, came flooding back. No, I said, my voice unwavering. You will not be released. You will remain trapped, never to harm another soul. The entity's form flickered more erratically now, desperation evident in its movements.
Do you think you can keep me locked away forever? Others will come, and I will be free.
That's where you're wrong, I retorted. I'll make sure no one ever stumbles upon this place again. The entity screamed in frustration, the sound reverberating through the cellar. Its form began to destabilize, like a broken signal, rapidly shifting between its multiple guises. But amidst the chaotic transformations, I noticed a pattern. The creature was weakening, and my refusal to give in was causing it. Then it hit me. The age-old adage, knowledge is power, was proving true once again. Here, in the cellar, the boundary between the known and the unknown was thin. By refusing to release the entity and remaining steadfast in my understanding of its deceit, I was essentially stripping it of its strength. The realization was liberating. The power dynamic had shifted. You are weak, I declared, feeling a surge of confidence. Your manipulations won't work on me. The entity let out a sound somewhere between a roar and a whimper. Its form grew fainter, barely holding on to its presence in the room.
This isn't over, Jake,
it whispered, its voice a mere shadow of the domineering force it once was.
As long as there is fear in the hearts of people, I will exist.
And with that, the entity faded away, leaving only the empty, oppressive silence of the cellar. For a moment I stood there, processing what had transpired. The mental and emotional battle was over, at least for now. The danger posed by the entity was real, but as long as I remembered the lessons from this encounter, I was confident I could keep it at bay. Slowly, I ascended the cellar steps, shutting the door firmly behind me. The battle was won, but the war against the unknown would continue. For now, I had made my choice, and the consequences of that decision would reverberate for years to come. After some time, the sun broke through the thick canopy, its rays piercing the lingering shadows of the cabin. It was morning again. The weight I'd felt since I first stepped foot in this place seemed to have lifted. The entity's presence had faded, but its influence remained, an indelible mark on my psyche. I wandered through the cabin, memories of my family echoing in its every nook and cranny. I realized I could no longer look at it with the same affection. Every corner was tainted with the malevolent touch of the entity, every creak of the wood a reminder of its voice, every glint of sunlight a reflection of its deceptive glow. For days, I worked on a plan to ensure that no one would ever fall victim to the entity's deceptions again. It became evident that the cabin had to be destroyed. I gathered materials, intent on sealing the cellar for good, making it an inescapable prison for the malevolent force that dwelled within. I created a thick concrete seal, ensuring the entrance to the cellar was utterly inaccessible. Days turned into nights, and nights into days. With every mix of cement and every layer of bricks, I felt a piece of the weight lifting from my soul. The entity might exist, but it wouldn't be able to harm anyone else, not on my watch. Once the entrance was fortified, I set about dismantling the cabin. I removed any valuables, any traces of my family's history that hadn't been tainted by the creature below. The heavy timbers were set ablaze, the fire consuming the wooden structure, reducing it to ash and memories. As I stood watching the flames dance and lick the sky, I felt a mix of emotions. There was sorrow for the loss of the precious home of my grandparents, anger at the unseen force that had tainted it, and relief that it would no longer be a threat to anyone. When the embers cooled and the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of the cabin but charred wood and ashes. The site where it once stood was now a testament to the power of will and the sacrifices one must make in the face of incomprehensible evil. I packed my belongings into my car, took one last look at the desolate clearing, and vowed never to return. The woods, once welcoming, now whispered secrets best left unheard. As I drove away, the weight of the past days pressing down on me, I tried to focus on the future. A future free from the chains of the past and the clutches of malevolent entities. The cabin was gone, but the lessons learned would stay with me forever. And so, I left behind the legacy of my grandparents and the horrors of the unseen, hoping that the choices I made would protect others from the unknown dangers lurking in the shadows.